Hey there, guys. Welcome to the next episode of Cosmedi Pros. I'm here today with Hayley Jepsen, the Resilient Hairdresser. Hayley, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, Hayley, you've got a background in the hairdressing industry and as a psychotherapist before now coming more into coaching and helping people with the leadership area. So, to start with, would you like to kind of
hmm
share a bit about your background, how you got into that, and how you progressed into the industry?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of it's a long-winded story, and I'm going to give you a slightly succinct version. I
Sure.
was a hairdresser behind the chair for 30 years. And so, I worked in all different areas of the industry. I've been employed, self-employed, a mobile hairdresser, an educator, an MVQ assessor. I've worked in all different areas of the industry. And I always really struggled with burnout. And around about 20 years into my career, I was very, very burnt out. Although I looked very, very successful from the outside, I was generally always the highest earner wherever I worked. People, I had waiting lists and all of that, but I was really unhappy in my work. But I was also depressed. I'd been depressed on and off since I think about 14, I remember first really feeling it. And so around this time, I'm probably like early 30s. And I had just decided to get a therapist. Eventually, I got a therapist, and this really changed the direction of my life. I would say that decision to get a therapist, and so I worked with a therapist for a couple of years on myself and felt much better. But my feelings about hairdressing didn't change. In fact, I think it got a little worse because as I got mentally healthier, I felt that the culture where I was working was a problem, and I was incredibly burnt out, and I couldn't figure out how to change it. And so I decided to retrain as a psychotherapist. I just said to my therapist, I want to do what you do. And she told me what the steps were. And they took me on for the training, even though I didn't quite have some of the qualifications needed, because they said, you're a hairdresser and you always make great therapists, which was really interesting, I thought, and in hindsight kind of makes me chuckle. But I retrained as a psychotherapist. It took 4 years. I did that while I was behind the chair part time. And then I left hairdressing and I thought, I'm never coming back. I'm done. I've got a sit down job and a plan. And I was thrilled. And I worked as a psychotherapist for about 5 years, and in different areas. I volunteered at a drug place. I had a job in a sixth form college. I had a private practice. I did lots of different stuff and I loved it. And I love using my brain in that way. But after a few years, I started to find the work very lonely and quite isolating. I was used to working in a team and having bants in the staff room, and that wasn't really happening for me as a therapist. And I felt quite lonely. And I thought to myself, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this forever. And around this time, a friend of mine asked me to come and do some colour in their salon. They were desperate for a colourist, and that's what I did. I was always a triple booked colourist. That was how I rolled. And I decided to go and help my friend out, really not because I wanted to be a hairdresser again, but because I thought it might offset the loneliness and I wanted to help my friend. And this was really the crux of where things really changed, because when I went back into the salon, I loved it. And you've got to remember, when I left, I didn't. I was not happy. I completely retrained and spent thousands retraining as a therapist. And when I went back into hairdressing, I loved it. And so slowly over the next year, I went from doing a day to them to going full time, reducing my psychotherapy practice right down. And this was a shock to me. I didn't see this coming. I was like out of the industry. And so I really thought about, why are things different for me now? Why is things different this time? Why am I not laying awake at night worrying about my clients? Why am I not exhausted all the time and burnt out? Why am I happier? And I realized that the training I'd had as a psychotherapist was really serving me as a hairdresser. It was really helping me behind the chair deal with people, manage myself, manage my stress, and give me some great people skills. And so I thought, oh, I've got something new here, and I'm going to try and bottle it and tell as many hairdressers about it as I know. And so I started writing workshops and stuff around the theories of psychology that I could identify that were helping me. And that's how really the Resilient Hairdresser was born. And then a few years down the line, not many, maybe 1 or 2 years later, my back became a massive problem. My back is shot. And it's been a problem for a long time in my career, but it became very clear to me that I wasn't going to be able to stand up for 9 hours a day for much longer. And I really needed to push the Resilient Hairdresser forward. And then COVID happened. My back got worse, and I just decided not to do hair on the other side of that. And I just took a risk and needs must, and I pushed the Resilient Hairdresser forward and through lockdowns and stuff. And now that's what I do full time. I work solely with the hair and beauty industry on bringing mental health and resilience training to the industries, which is well needed, it seems. I needed it, and it seems plenty of other people do. I got really tired of watching talented people leave the industry because of burnout and because they thought things could never be different. And I think that's the problem. When people think things can't change, they leave. And I wanted to address that. So here we are.
That's interesting. I think, like you said at the beginning as well, with where you had the outward appearance of being successful, and obviously there was a lot going on for you behind. And I think that's across the beauty industry, across entrepreneurship, and especially in the social media age. Of us can seem on Instagram, we're doing brilliant, we're really strong, but yeah, there's a lot going on in the background. You don't necessarily know, the troubles people are going through or dealing with. So I can see having someone to fill that gap or maybe helping that, because it's a lonely road sometimes, as well as a sort of solo entrepreneur, especially if you don't have someone to share. So I can imagine you feel that a little bit
Yeah, I
in
think so.
the assistance.
Yeah, I think community is everything. One of the reasons I stopped being a therapist was I didn't really have community, not enough,
Yeah.
and community makes a difference, being around people. And I think a lot of people in the hair and beauty industry are like being around people, but also being around people is what drains us. It's a funny balance. We love it and it's tiring and it can be tough, but we miss it when it's gone. I certainly did. And so it is really interesting. And I think what you're saying is true. I got what I always wanted. I was really busy, very successful, very good at what I did. And I was so unhappy. And I speak to people all the time who've got everything they ever wanted and they're so unhappy. And we build
Yes.
businesses we don't like quite a lot. And then we got to undo it. So yeah, it's tough.
So the main two topics you focus on are kind of mental health, burnout, and leadership. So why, particularly in the cosmetic and beauty industry, do you think those two are so important or at the forefront?
Yeah, I mean, mental health is my main gig, like mental health is what I want to talk about, and improving the mental health and experience of hairdressers and beauty people when they're doing their job. Burnout is so common in our industries for varying reasons, I think. And burnout, it's an easier entry conversation into mental health than tell me about your depression. Tell me about your anxiety. People are not so willing to talk about that. And you don't, but burnout, people will talk about that. And when I talk about burnout, hairdressers go, that's me. It's like they see themselves in it. And I think it's easier to talk about. And I think burnout leads to anxiety, leads to depression, or it can go the other way around as well. Being anxious can cause you to be really burnt out because it's exhausting. But I think it's an easy entry point. And I also think it's a massive problem in the hair and beauty industries because for loads of reasons. And then the other reason I like talking about leadership is that I think with great leadership, we can make massive culture changes. And so I think if you want to improve the mental health of the hair and beauty industry, we need to start educating leaders on how to filter that into the cultures where they're leading. And I think it's tough being a leader in the hair and beauty industry. There's not a lot of training and around. It's not common that people do leadership training. I'm not sure I've ever been managed by anyone who's been on a leadership course. It's just like, oh, you're the busiest in the salon. You can be the manager now. Have more to do. And when people get salons, they're not often thinking about leading at the beginning. They're thinking about how they're going to decorate it, how great it's going to be. And usually a few years in, when you start employing people, you start realizing that leadership is a massive deal. And so I really wanted to start talking about leadership in a different way. I think about it I think we're a relationship and a people business. And I think if you get really skilled at dealing with people, developing your empathy, developing your boundaries, learning how to speak to people well, thinking about career progression, thinking about looking after people, and thinking about yourself as a coach, I think things change. So I'm really passionate about it. But essentially, I got into leadership training because I thought it was a way to change the culture and bring mental health conversations into the industry quick.
I think that's good with the stepping stone with the burnout, starting the conversation. And I think you can get the trust. You can see how you'd recognize or probably be more ready to admit that some of the symptoms of burnout, oh, yeah, that's a bit me.
Mental health is a funny one because some people are happy to talk about it and some people aren't. And I'm very respectful of that. I get it. And so I think you've got to start talking about what's easiest. You've got to meet people where they are. They're not coming for therapy. When I'm talking on Instagram about stuff, we've not made an agreement. So I think I try and do things where people can see themselves in it and go, oh, yeah, oh, that's hard. I could do something different. Yeah.
On your experience, what do you think are some common signs of burnout that professionals in the industry should be aware of, or some first warning signs?
I think if you're thinking about it in yourself, there's a few, and things like joylessness is a big one where, when you think things like, I used to be fun, me, what happened? You start taking everything very seriously. You feel very seriously about everything, and there's not much joy left and space for fun. When we get burnt out, we let self-care go and investing in the relationships that matter. We let all the stuff that helps go. And then what happens is we end up a no fun zone as well, just to make it a little bit harder. And so I think when you start to feel like, when someone says to you, do you want to go for dinner? And you think, do you know how busy I am? I haven't got time to go for dinner. And then when this sort of thing's happening and you feel like you're no fun anymore and you've not had any, this is probably a sign that you're burnt out, or you've certainly got far too much on your plate and you're on the way. Another thing is feeling resentful. Resentful's massive. When you feel resentful, it's like a big arrow pointing to where there's a problem. And when we feel resentful, it really regularly leads to burnout. It usually means we need maybe a boundary. But when we feel resentful, we're probably giving more than we want to or more than we can. And when we do that for a long time, it will affect your mood. And it will certainly contribute to burnout. And so those things, but also when you get burnt out, for varying reasons, you tend to get sick more often. Your immune system starts to deplete due to the cortisol that's pumping around your body due to stress and stuff. And it starts to attack your immune system. And what happens is people tend to pick up every single bug that ever goes around. I see people and it's like they're just constantly sick. They're picking up everything. And so this can be a sign that you're burning out because your immune system's not doing well. It's worried about other things. And so if you want to look at maybe people who are working for you, looking for signs of burnout, I would be looking at people who are increasingly getting sicker and more time off and seeming run down. They're certainly doing more than they can. And it's not always necessarily at work. Sometimes people are burning out because of their home lives, but it means they can't show up to work with the energy necessary. It can be complex. But yeah, I think they're the main things to really be thinking about.
Yeah, I think especially in hair and beauty industry, where you said it is a very social, customer-facing role. So
Yeah.
if that sickness or that lack of enthusiasm starts, you've got to almost have your face on all the time for the customer. So if that's
Yeah.
sort of creeping in, it's going to have a knock-on effect of, other
All of
factors.
this. Exactly this, because, entertaining the clients is part of the job, and some of us do it more than others, but that kind of game face, the show must go on, all of that. And it's easier if it's real, and if your mood is low, and I've experienced this, I was depressed and I was showing up every day and no one would know. I was entertaining, I was funny, and it was exhausting. And so when your mood is low and you're forced to be in a good mood all day, this takes a lot of your energy and then it contributes to burnout. And so it all all melds into itself. Like there's lots of different ways you can end up burnt out or anxious or depressed, but they can kind of feed into each other. Yeah. So this is why I think we need to be taught how to take care of ourselves in the early days of our career. I think it would be a game changer. I think if the stuff I know now I was taught in my late teens, I think I would have had a different career.
Yeah, I think just yeah, with business in general, that's
Yeah.
very, although it's like planned and strategy, like we do kind of fall into it. In my own background, I kind of went from freelancer to agency, and it's sort of similar things. And same with like the beauty and the salon. You might be working as a solo entrepreneur on yourself, then moving to a clinic, and we're just kind of learning these skills as we go. Not really, we can go on sort of training
Yeah.
after. And like you said, some of the stuff like leadership, they're not necessarily the things you're thinking of. I'm going to go on a course about leadership. I'm going to go on a course, you're going to learn new treatments or new obvious skills. But yeah, it can miss a lot
Yeah.
of the stuff that, would actually help, as you get bigger or start managing teams
Yeah.
or just get more responsibilities.
Yeah, it's just not common in our culture. That's what I think it is. Leadership training is not common in our culture. And any kind of business and leadership courses that are floating around, they tend to be very numbers focused, and very business. And I think I'm not seeing anyone teaching us how to deal with people long term, how to look after them and look after yourself and your business. It's really tough. And like you say, when hairdressers and beauty people are off sick, there are consequences. If you're freelance, you're terrified of getting sick because no work, no money. When you're employed, you're scared to ring in sick and all your clients are getting cancelled and the consequences of that. And if you're a salon owner, it's stressful when people ring in sick. And so looking after our people better benefits everybody.
Do you find, I think particularly as well in the UK, it's still a bit of a taboo subject as well. We don't really culturally like asking for help. Do you think that's a barrier for some people?
I think so. It's so funny, really, because I've been a therapist for a long time and stuff. I'm like, I just talk about mental health like it's talking about the weather. And I forget sometimes that not everybody's like that. But I think things are changing. I do think these conversations are becoming more common. I think that the COVID era really changed things where people who didn't think mental health was a thing that was a concern for them started to notice they had a mental health in COVID. And I think that did change things a lot where conversations became more common. I think there'll always be certain people who struggle with asking for help. But I sort of think if we were setting ourselves up for success earlier on with the resilience training and leadership training, it wouldn't be seen as failing and asking for help. Do you know what I mean? It would just become part of the skill set that you learn along with balayage and cutting a grad bob. I think these are skills that we need when we're going to be customer facing for 40, 50 years or leading a team.
So, what are some, skills or strategies people are in the early day of burnout or listening to this and starting to recognize, oh, maybe that's me? What are some quickish, easy steps they could start implementing to help?
Yeah, I think that when you're facing burnout, what you've got is an energy problem. You're using more energy than you have, and you've been doing that for a long time. And so you end up in like an energy deficit. And so the first thing I think you need to do is start figuring out how you're going to do less than you're currently doing. This puts people into a massive panic. I teach a course called Burnout and Boundaries, and one of the first things I say is, what are you going to put down for a month while we do this course? And people are like, I can't let go of anything. It will all fall to pieces. And I'm like, I explained that you're using more energy than you've got. You can't keep going. You're already burnt out. Next step is sickness, and people can get hospitalized with burnout. It really will turn into very much a physical problem for a lot of people. And so you've got to accept step one, accept that you've got to be doing less than what you're doing right now for a while. You've got to recoup your energy so that you can start thinking properly and thinking strategically, because you can't think strategically when you're burnt out and in survival mode, because you're just like one foot in front of the other. You can't look at the big picture and think, what do I need to do? And so you've got to get enough energy back that you can start, looking at your life and your business with a bit of a bird's eye view and figuring out what you need to do. And another thing that happens when you're in survival mode and burnt out is you lose the capacity to play, which means things like use your imagination. And you need to be able to use your imagination to solve problems and change your situation. And that's why it becomes so hard. And so for me, the first thing you've got to do is work on your energy. What are you going to stop doing? How are you going to stop your energy getting drained? How are you going to start clawing some energy back? And it means all sorts of things for different people, but it's usually putting some responsibilities down, handing them to other people. Maybe for often it's not stop doing as many hours, it's stop doing more hours than you're supposed to. Most people say, oh, I should probably stop doing people's hair on my day off. And I'm like, that would be good. That would be a great start. People are usually doing more than they're supposed to, in air quotes. Like maybe they're doing 4 days a week, they're official, but they're really doing 6. And so it's about finding some time, energy, and brain space so you can figure out what you're going to do. That's where I think people should start. And I think people miss this step out. They run towards things like buying another course, changing, thinking I need new policies and new boundaries. It's like, yeah, you totally do need those things. But at the moment, you're just giving a burnt out person more to do.
Another area you're quite interested in is ADHD and leadership around that. How do you think the beauty industry needs to evolve and support mental health and inclusivity?
Well, I have ADHD. I got a diagnosis last year. I was 48 when I got diagnosed, which was a relief. And I was like, oh, it all makes sense now. But what's really interesting is people with ADHD are much more likely to burn out. It's part of the deal. And it made loads of sense to me why I was constantly in a cycle of burning out through my life. And when I look back on, my depression and stuff, I really think that was all an ADHD situation, which was completely missed and undiagnosed and all of that sort of thing. However, to answer your question, I think ADHD is more prevalent in creative people, or creative people are more likely to be neurodiverse, however you want it. And I don't have stats on that, but it's commonly sort of thought of that people who are neurodiverse have a creativity. And it makes sense that those people are going into the hair and beauty industry because it's creative and it's fun and it's busy and it's stimulating and there's stuff going on. But it also, the fun and the stimulation is brilliant until it's not. And then it's overstimulating. You just see, there's all these things and it's complex. But I think educating yourself around neurodiversity is smart if you're a leader, understanding it. And I think this might give you more understanding of sometimes yourself and sometimes your team. But I think it's about treating everyone as an individual and meeting their needs and things like that. I found the salon more overstimulating as I got older as well. The noise, the amount of conversations. And I remember looking back now, finding it so hard to concentrate on what my client was saying to me because the person next to me was talking so loud over their hairdryer and the music that I couldn't tune their conversation out. And basically all this contributed to me being exhausted. It's all the little things that were adding up to the burnout. And I think I could have done really simple things now, like got some loops in my ears that drowned out a bit of background noise. I think there's lots of smaller things that we could be doing. I could have been doing more quiet appointments. There's all sorts of things, isn't there? But I think really it's more just about the starting places. You've got to understand it, got to get educated about it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more awareness, a bit like you said, since COVID, mental health's become more of a topic, but neurodiversity overall has
Massive
got
as
like a bit
well.
more awareness around it now, and the fact that we do think different, interact different, get affected different in sort of different environments.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's probably still got some way to go, but yeah, I think
Yeah, I think
there
it's
is that.
also what makes us capable of doing these jobs for a lot of us. It's why we're great at what we do. I don't like the phrase things like ADHD is a superpower because it's debilitating to people, for some people. But I also think there's a magic that comes with these brains. That's how I think about mine. There's a magic to my brain, but there's also a real exhaustion to my brain. She's on or she's off. And it's brilliant when she's on, and it's really tough when she's off. And I don't have a lot of say in it. And I have to ride that wave. And I found that working for myself has made that easier. That is the simple fact. Now I control my time and my energy. It's certainly, I found that a lot easier to manage. Yeah. But I think small tweaks for people in the workplace could really help.
So with that, what do you think are some of the sort of, the ADHD personality or similar conditions within the beauty and cosmetic industry?
Yeah, I mean, I know more about ADHD than autism. I mean, when it was interesting though, when I was a therapist in a sixth form college, so many of my clients were young autistic people who were realizing they were autistic, and were struggling in certain ways. And so I did have a lot of clients that were autistic back in the day, but I know a bit more about ADHD. But I think some of the great things about ADHD is often we're brilliant problem solvers and we can think out of the box. We've got good creative solutions. I see this in myself. I think it's what makes me a good coach because I like solving problems in the moment for other people. Not so much myself, but I remember my therapist said to me once, and she didn't know I had ADHD, that wasn't a thing at the time, but she said to me, your brain is interesting, Hayley. She said, you can assess a situation very fast and see where the problem is. And there's a word for this now, and I can't, it's something like homing and roaming thinking. And it's like you can roam and assess everything and then hone in very quickly on what needs solving. And I really see that in myself. And now I know that's a sign of it. That's an ADHD trait. And I think, oh, I like that about myself. It's proven really useful as a coach. Often we're brilliant at thinking on our feet, and I love that about myself. I like doing things live. I love being asked. I love doing podcasts when I don't know what I'm going to be asked. I find it more fun. I enjoy it more. I like doing lives. I do everything as live as possible because I find it more fun. That dopamine comes heavy with those lives. I like it. But I just find the energy comes when I'm put on the spot a little bit more. And I like that about myself. I think it's a really useful trait as an educator and a coach to be good in a crisis. And ADHD people are often good in a crisis. It works really well. But then, I have a VA who's autistic and we work well together. Like, thank God for her. She's logical. She remembers stuff. She likes doing the things that I think are a bit more tedious. That's her jam. She likes it. She's really good at the tech stuff that I find a bit tedious and draining. And so there's amazing skills, with people who are autistic, the logicalness and problem solving in a different way, so I think we work together brilliantly.
A good blend. Looking a bit at some of your other accomplishments and campaign, I know you co-wrote the mental health campaign with L'Oreal, the Heads Up, I think it's
Yeah,
called, yeah.
that's right.
So how did that kind of come about and the impact of that?
Yeah, I got an email one day saying L'Oreal want to have a meeting with you. And I was like, when L'Oreal calls, you go to those meetings. And I was thrilled. And, I was asked to be, it didn't start out like to be asked to be involved in Head Up. It was like, we want to ask you some questions about mental health. And I was like, great. And then I saw that this program was being built, and then I was invited to help write it, and contribute to what would be in it and stuff like that. And Head Up is a campaign that will run with L'Oreal now. It's something that they're committed to. And my feelings were how brilliant that someone as powerful and with as much influence on the industry as L'Oreal cares about this. I saw that as a massive change coming in the industry, because when L'Oreal care about it, other people have got to start caring about it, and then people care about it, and it becomes more the norm. It's getting filtered into the norm of our industry now. And so I was absolutely thrilled that it's happening, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it. I think L'Oreal doing something like this is massive. I think it's massive. I'm so proud to be part of it.
It's definitely good when you can have those bigger brands coming on board and pushing the message, because
Yeah,
they've got a lot more reach than
they've got a
the
lot of
individual.
reach.
Yeah.
They've got a few quid. They've got sway. People listen. And so I think they can make waves faster than me sat in my little corner of the internet. It really can push things forward. And really, what I'm interested in is cultural change in our industries. And I think being part of this makes me feel like I'm part of that. And so I'm so pleased. It's interesting how Head Up came around. L'Oreal did a survey of loads of hairdressers globally and asked them what their number one struggle was right now, because they wanted to do something around a social impact. And it came back mental health, and they were surprised. That's what I heard. They thought it was going to be money worries or other stuff. And it was surprising to them that 65% of hairdressers globally said mental health is my number one problem right now. And they were like, well, we need to do something about this. And so I think it's interesting how that came around. They just wanted to know what a hairdresser's struggling with. We're gonna try and help with that, and this is what it was, which wasn't a surprise to me.
Then that shows like just how important it is as well when some like the bigger ones in the industry just weren't really aware of it. Someone.
Yeah, they didn't. I remember talking. It's like that wasn't, because I think around the time they were doing it, hairdressers were really worried about money and stuff, and COVID was happening. And money is often talked about as a stress in our industry for varying reasons, in varying different ways, depending how you work and who you are. um yeah, and I think the thing is, people more will talk about that more, but again, like what we keep saying, people are not so forward about talking about their mental health problems. And I think that's why it's a surprise, because people are not talking about it, but they are struggling with it. And let them fill in a survey anonymously, they're gonna tell you and be more honest about what an issue this is in our industry. But I'm so pleased that there's real signs of cultural change. I see it every day. I speak to salon owners all the time who are really committed to not having this happen in their salons. They want to be better. They want to really take care of their staff. And I talk to freelancers who are, brilliant with their boundaries, living a great work-life balance. It's happening. I see it.
It's great as well with doing a research like that. It really does show as well if someone's sitting there thinking like it's me, I'm failing, or it's kind of thoughts they might be having with burnout, when they go, oh, actually, the majority of my peers are
Yeah, it
also
goes
having the
across.
same problem. I think then that,
Yeah.
makes the conversation easier to have. You're not thinking like, oh, only I have this problem.
Everyone thinks it's only them. It's so interesting. I think it's one of the things I'm passionate about is keeping the conversation going about mental health, because for exactly that reason, when people realize it's not just them, that is a comfort, and it makes people more likely to speak out. It also makes them realize that there are changes you can make and people you can help. And so I think it's really important. I do a live called 5 questions. I've been doing it since lockdown. It's about 2 years now. And most weeks, I'm going to say most weeks, Matt, most weeks I interview a hairdresser with usually a high profile, and I ask everyone the same 5 questions. And the first question is, what's your experience with burnout? And people talk about it openly. And I think it's so comforting for people watching that they go, wow, if that person is struggling with burnout, it's okay that I am as well. When they look at people they consider of being very successful, high profile, whatever, whatever. And when they're honest about their experience, I think that is makes massive changes in our industry. It's keeping that conversation going.
Looking a bit now at the services and what you actually provide. So I'm a hairdresser, beauty professional. I've come to you for help. What's the process of working with you? What would we be looking to in the early
Yeah, what have
stages?
I got?
What do you
I've
get?
got
Yeah,
all
what do you get?
sorts of things. Yeah, I've got all sorts of things actually. And I work with, I mean, I'm called the Resilient Hairdresser, and hairdressing is my background and what I really understand. But what became very clear to me early on was that beauty therapists and, nail techs and all of that, it's the same struggles that people are having. We're customer facing and we're often overworked, and so that it's the same issues. And so I work with hairdressers mainly, but I work with plenty of beauty people as well. Now, it depends. I'll give you a quick overview. You can work with me one to one. You can literally just book an hour and talk to me about whatever you want. That's one thing that's quite simple. I run a program called Burnout and Boundaries. That's my most popular program. It's where a lot of people start working with me. And that's where it's like, it's a group program. And again, working in a group works really well because you feel less alone. And everyone's going, oh, me too. I feel like that. I feel like that. I feel so seen. There's a lot of that going on. And then people start making the changes together and cheerleading each other, which is amazing. But again, burnout and boundaries is what it says on the tin. I want to get you out of burnout, keep you out of burnout, and figure out what boundaries you need to make that happen for you. And so that I do that, and anyone can do that, literally anybody. I teach a leadership program called Lead from the Heart, and that's a group coaching program it's for salon owners, not managers. It's for the owners, who I consider the leaders. It's the people who actually make the decisions, and I talk to them in that program about how to get the best from your manager, because a lot of people are getting managers and they're not really empowering them, and then thinking, I've got a manager, but they don't do anything. And so we address all that sort of stuff, but all the things I talk about, around handling your people better so that you're less stressed, because salon owners, their main stress is usually their team, and hairdressers, their main stress is their clients. That's the difference, that's how that seems to go. And so I teach a leadership program, and I have a membership. Anyone can join that: employed, freelance, waxers, nail folks, salon owners, anyone in the hair and beauty industry. And the membership, it's called the Resilient Hairdresser membership. And that is focused on people who want to start looking after themselves as a priority, people who need help with accountability around getting and staying out of burnout, making sure they're looking after themselves. It's people who like self-improvement. I teach a little class every month about whatever I fancy teaching that month, but it's, it will be psychology based, self-helpy based, and it gives you a chance to learn about new things that might help you, try them on. But and it's such a supportive group. I love it so much. The culture in there is brilliant. I work hard on that it's a supportive group, because so many groups can descend into misery and moaning. And although I don't promote toxic positivity either, where it's, you must be positive at all costs. It's people are wanting to look after themselves and cheerlead other people that are doing the same. And so I do that as well. I think that's everything, Matt, off the top of my head. I'm working on a few things. So if you ask me in a year, I'm working on a couple of other big projects.
That's good. We'll have to have you back for
that. I want to do more bigger impacts mental health consultancy stuff. So helping big leaders bring mental health and wellness into their business, so more top-down approaches where, say, someone owns a franchise of salons and they want to start thinking about helping the staff and themselves, and something that is bigger, than, say, one salon. So more franchises and bigger businesses, and helping change, bring wellness and resilience to the forefront and make it part of your culture, of your business and your values, and help people do that. So I'm doing more of that.
There's a lot of good work going on there, and yourself very busy.
Keeping myself very busy. I'm also, there's something I'm working on, which is doing something for colleges, working on a webinar for colleges, so that we can start introducing this to learners in the early days, start introducing them to the idea of burnout, self-care, boundaries, stress management, ways of looking after themselves, things that they can do for themselves, and plant that seed early days. So it's in development stages, that, Matt.
Yeah, I think with training, like we talked on earlier, yeah, you can get that in at an earlier stage, so it's not such a surprise, or they're having to make people a lot more efficient earlier on.
Yeah, I think it's true. And in colleges, they have, I've been reading the stuff that they need to do, and they have these wider topics that they need to cover and stuff. And I think, oh, I could fill that gap really easily and with something really useful. So I'm going to.
If anyone's aspiring to, they want to make a difference in the beauty industry, but also prioritize their mental health, what are some advice points or wisdom you'd kind of give them going forward to keep in mind?
I think that one of the main things to do is keep your eye on your boundaries, you know. I think that's what really important, and boundaries with yourself are so tough. When you first start working on your boundaries, you usually work on them with other people, and that feels hard, setting boundaries with clients and maybe family and stuff like that. But the boundaries that you do with yourself, ooh, they're tough. They're the ones I struggle with mainly now. It's like making sure I am looking after myself even when I don't want to. It's like doing what I know is good for me, even when I'm not in the mood. And with a bit of ADHD thrown in, that can be really tough to motivate myself to do stuff that I consider boring and tedious, like exercising. But I think if you want to look after yourself, well, I think if you want to make a difference to others, you've got to look after yourself first. And so, yeah, I think about my self-care as managing my energy, not necessarily my time. I'm constantly monitoring how much energy I've got and what I can take on, because when I take on too much, everything falls to pieces. Being over busy, is not great for me. And I learned that when I was in therapy. It became very clear that that was a big problem. And so I live by that now. And I think that's just a great lesson for everyone, really. No one functions well when they're overwhelmed and doing more than they're capable of. Slowly, everything around you starts to fall to pieces. So, yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's just great insights. It's been really interesting talking to you today. I think you've given a lot there and pointed out a lot of valuable stuff that does get overlooked. And I think even wide, just in business in general, I think there's a lot of
Yeah,
helpful stuff that, people could transfer over. Is
true.
there anything else you feel you'd want to touch on or like to share with our audience?
Ooh, I feel like I should say something. What do I want to say? I mean, go and watch Head Up if you've not watched it. It's free. It's on L'Oreal Access. It's free for everyone, even if you're not a L'Oreal client. It's for anybody. And there's some really good stuff to get you going in that. And so I would go and give Head Up a watch. Just, literally Google Head Up L'Oreal, it'll pop up. It's on YouTube, as some of it's on YouTube, but all of it's on L'Oreal Access. And also I have a free webinar you can access it on my website, my Instagram. But if you want to, a little intro to how I work with burnout and mental health in the hair and beauty industry, this short webinar will really give you some tools and places to get started, and help with your mindset about how you're going to think about that. And so I think there's two great resources there that I would be looking at if you're interested in this stuff.
As well, wherever this is, there will be links down wherever you're
I'll
watching or
give you
listening
a
to
link,
this
Smart, and
for
you
that.
can put them
So
in the
yeah,
show notes.
I can put the links to that, and as well as Hayley's sort of socials and websites. Comment any questions you have. If I can answer them, I will, but I'm sure Hayley will help me as
You
I
can
pass
send
them
them
on.
off to
And
me if you've got
Matt.
questions.
So thank you for joining us today, Hayley. Make sure you guys connect with her on social media, look for the 5 questions, and check out the links below to learn more.
Thanks so
And
much,
we
Matt.
will
It's been
see.
great.